Hello, everyone, and welcome to my channel. Welcome back. You may remember back when I read the beginning of The First Binding by R. Virdi, and today I want to talk about the book in more detail because it is one of my favorites of the year and it has a lot going for it. But before I get into the details of the book, I want to go into the cover. And excuse me if this is a little awkward because it's a chunky book. It's over 800 pages, so it's not the easiest to hold. But as you can see, the part I really want to focus on here is the protagonist, as we can see on the cover, because it's important to recognize the just how helpful it is to see South Asian characters on a major release from a major publisher on the cover of the books, and also just how much this cover tells us about the book, because we can see the raggedness of this character, his staff, his clothing is in tatters, and he's been on this journey for we don't know how long, but we can see on this character the journey that he's gone through, and in some ways that tells us about the journey that we can expect to see when we go through this book. And so, in many ways, it delivers because thankfully I got a copy of this beautiful hardcover after having the privilege of reading an early access copy, thanks to the publisher. Thanks so much to Macmillan-Tor for giving me the opportunity to read an early copy, as well as Netgalley for approving me, because I always appreciate the opportunity to see and read books by new authors who otherwise may have a difficulty growing an audience and can use a little help. And that's why I'm glad that I got to be part of the campaign before release to spread the word for this amazing book. And I know from what I've heard through the grapevine that the author, Mr. Virdi himself, was quite glad that I really saw what he was trying to do with this book. And so I want to go into a little more detail. Some of you have read my review, so if you have, then you might not find this to be particularly useful unless you really like seeing my happy face. But I want to go into, hopefully flesh out my review as I go. So this will be a little on the fly. It's never going to be perfect, but that's what I like about my channel, is I try not to cut out all the little foibles, all the little mistakes, because part of the fun about YouTube is, for me, is showing myself through the channel. So for those of you who aren't familiar, The First Binding is a big South Asian fantasy, and part of why I like it is because I read a lot of epic fantasy, and there's a couple different types of epic fantasy, as I sort of described in my video series, or my video on the Dandelion Dynasty series. There are different types of epics, and there are different types of epic fantasies, and oftentimes what that means is we have an entire dramatis personae at the front of the book, we have a giant roster of characters, and if you really want to have a fun epic fantasy, you tend to see a glossary of terms at the back. All these things that for many readers they say, no way, I don't want that. That's not what I'm interested in at all. I have a few friends like this who will immediately say, no way, I'm not reading that, as soon as they see this glossary of terms. Because the idea is, if they have to put it in a glossary, then you're not going to understand it going through the book. And we certainly don't want that. And so one of the things I like about The First Binding is that it's approachable compared to some epic fantasies. It's to the point, and the cast is fairly small. So while we have a few different characters, main characters, there's really just our primary main character who tells the story. And part of the reason I don't like to use his name is because he's a mysterious character and he's revealed slowly throughout the book. And so it's one of those where in early chapters he's just the wanderer and nobody wants to say his name, and I like to keep it that way for at least this review. So the first binding starts out slowly, and our main character is introduced, as I said, as this mysterious storyteller. And in the early chapters and the introduction, he's shown as the storyteller in a pub, and he's trying to bring people along for his story. And his identity is slowly revealed over the next few chapters. And by chapter 5, I could get a taste of where this book was headed. And thankfully, my hunch was right. And by the end of chapter 6, I was hooked. So this is a long book, as I said. It's about 800 pages in the US print version on hardcover. And so it's a bit longer than most first books in epic fantasies, because typically what happens is the publishers will not give them as much page length to write for their first book, because they want to make sure they can do it right first before they get into the chonkers at the end. So even Malazan Books of the Fallen, one of my favorite series, the epic fantasy at the end, you get these giant books, but the first couple are a little shorter. But thankfully here, the publisher was willing to give an option here for a longer first book, and I think it really helps. And I think you will savor the journey if you haven't had the chance yet, as many of my fellow reviewers have fallen in love with this book, and I am really excited for what's to come next. So the early chapters of this book give you the impression that this is a classic tale of good and evil, light against darkness. However, there is no clear force of good any more than there is a good force of evil. So while there might be reviews out there suggesting somehow that this is full of tropes, and just like various major fantasy series, they clearly didn't finish the book. And so I don't give a lot of weight to these 1-star reviews, because they read like somebody made up their mind in a couple of chapters and decided that this was not for them, but they didn't really give it a chance, and I'm hoping you will. So the first binding isn't, like I said, the traditional 20 plus points of view, giant cast of characters type of book, and that's part of why I like it, because it reminded me of the unique point of view in the Ascendant series by K. Arsenal Rivera, and it focuses primarily on the one main character, Ari. And I like this because while it's a massive book, we're really telling the story of Ari and his growth throughout the tale, and all the different things he went through as a child, as an adolescent, and up through into the early stages of adulthood, where then this tale stops and we have to wait for book 2. So while the plot shifts between the tired wanderer telling his story and various phases in his early life, this slow unveiling of his life also is a slow unveiling of the magic system and the mysterious forces that Ari is hunting. So by the end of the book, we still don't have a full picture, but we have a good few hints of our own, and depending on how much you like to read into the books you're reading, you'll probably have a good idea for yourself of what this mysterious force is. Whether it's evil or not is for everyone to make up their own minds. So what I like about this series is that R.R. Virdi reveals just enough about the magic system and this mysterious force Ari is seeking to make for a satisfying conclusion, and also create a longing for the next book. The magic hooked me early on, and it held my interest until the end, because it rewards your patience. And I suspect that most of you who take the time to read it will press on and discover a rich and magical world. I found the magic system intriguing in part because it doesn't explain everything. And sometimes the details are only hinted at instead of explained in full detail, because we don't always need to know any more than we need to know the mysterious forces of the universe. I thought the first binding was a stunning start to a new series, and one that you will hopefully get a chance to enjoy and follow along for the tale. I look forward to discovering more, and I hope you like this video. And if you're watching, Mr. Virdi, I appreciate you so much for this wonderful book. And I hope you will follow along, like and subscribe, and also follow along this tale, because there's 2 more books to come from what I understand, and there's lots to come. So I hope you like and subscribe to this channel, and I look forward to seeing you again on my next video as we explore more South Asian and Asian tales and other tales by authors of color. And I hope you have a great, happy holidays. Thanks.